We're turning our attention to Psalm chapter 71. We've been in this series over the last few weeks, The Lost Art of Lament. And really, as a Western society, and particularly as Christians, we often don't have a lot of paradigm or much room in our thinking for emotions in the Christian life, lamenting the realities that we're facing in the world today. And when we look to the book of Psalms, we see that nearly 1/3 of the Psalms are full of Psalms of protest and lament and deep emotion. So today we want to look at a Psalm of David in chapter 71, and he says this: "In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness, deliver me and rescue me. Incline your ear to me and save me." I want you to focus on verse 1 with me. "In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame." That just jumped off of the page as I was reading this and preparing for our time together. This idea, "in you, O Lord, do I take refuge." I started to think about all of the things that I run to during a hard time, and I imagine you have some of those things as well. Maybe it's ice cream, or it's a book, or maybe it's a party, it's a whole bunch of friends, or maybe it's your bedroom by yourself, isolation. We run to all of these sorts of things to take refuge in. But then the second part of that verse 1 really struck me when it says this: "Let me never be put to shame." Let me never be put to shame. And I started thinking about a time in my life where I really came face to face with shame, and shame in a way that I didn't really even think that I had it. There's a Christian self-discovery, a spiritual discipline tool called the Enneagram. And in the Enneagram essentially looks at the different types of the human personality, and it breaks them down out of the basis of what is the root fear that this person is trying to avoid. And the Enneagram number that I have and was kind of reading through is this idea of being an achiever, somebody that's out to really work and get something done. And it says that the pain that they're trying to avoid is actually shame. And when I read that, I thought to myself, that couldn't be me. I'm not ashamed. I don't have anything to be ashamed of. I'm not hiding anything. I've got a lot to be proud of. I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my family. I love my friends. I don't have a lot to be ashamed of. And as I was reading the description, I realized that it was saying not just the shame of what you've done, but possibly the shame of what you haven't done. And that just flipped my whole world upside down, because I realized that inside of me, I can have a real hard time with just resting and enjoying a day off, enjoying the world around me. And my wife was actually the person that pointed this out to me, because we would often have a day off and I would say, okay, I just got to get one thing done. I want to go fix this. I want to work on this. I want to get this thing done. And she's like, "Jared, can't you just enjoy the moment?" And I was like, no, I can't just enjoy the moment. I've got to get this thing done first. And maybe you're wired like that, like I am. You have to do something in a day before you put your head down on a pillow. Now, it took Erin, my wife, to be able to point this out to me. And in a sense, she represented the Christ figure. She represented Jesus, if you will, as a person outside of who I am, trying to set me free and rescue me from and deliver me from this thing that I didn't realize I had a problem with. Now, that's the thing about shame. Shame is not just the things that you are running from, but it's often the thing you're running to. And I would venture to say that if you would take a little bit of time in prayer and self-reflection, that you'll find that there are some areas in your life where you're actually running to things, and they may not necessarily be bad things. See, that's the thing that we have to recognize, is that idolatry, the essence of replacing God with something else, is not necessarily that it's bad things. Often it's very good things, but it's good things that we try to make ultimate things. I know in my life that this is a continual healing process, and I can't tell you how happy I am, and I know how happy my wife is to realize that I can actually have a day off. I don't have to try to accomplish something, but I can enjoy the moment. I can be present in the moment. But it's really that tension that I know many of you are feeling, and I know I have felt, where it goes, wow, I've got something that is calling my attention. It's pulling me in a direction. And Greg, I wondered if you could talk about that for a minute, about, maybe an area, and I know shame is not a word we use in our culture, but what does that look like in your life?
Well, I actually, when you were talking about how you have a difficult time resting, I actually laughed, and I think that my wife, Melanie, when she hears this message, she's going to laugh too, because that is something that I very specifically battle with. There's a part of my personality is very accomplishment oriented. I love getting stuff done, and it can be a distraction from my time with God. I get up in the mornings early and spend time with the Lord, oftentimes in our family room. Well, I have 4 kids, and we live in that space, and so that space is often not totally clean by the time I get up in the morning and I'm spending time with the Lord. And I can find that my tendency is, all right, I have to do before I be. I have to make sure that I get this thing straightened so I'm not distracted in my time with God before I can actually just be with him. And that's something that I personally wrestle with too.
Yeah, something that I wrestle with is affirmation from others. So I tend to be drawn to more group settings where which isn't a bad thing. Like we were saying, it's something that we take and we seek refuge in besides God. And so I can tend to seek affirmation or acceptance from others and make that like and to feel the shame part. It's like, if I don't feel that, then I sink in on myself. I'm like, what's wrong with me? What do I need to fix? You know what I mean? When I'm not accepted by others. So that's something a vice that I run to other than God.
Right. And I want you to see how profound that first verse is when David says, in you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Because our world is full of a million different options of the things you could take refuge in. But I want to say this, Jesus is the only master who will actually set you free. Every other type of master will give you a image of the good life, but will actually enslave you in another way. And you think about the fact that if your master is work, you're enslaved by your production. If your master is beauty or appearance, you're enslaved by what people think about you. If your master is money, you have to always have a little bit more. If your master is your parents, then their opinion of you. And this is a thing that a lot of adults still struggle with. I'm not talking about just children, but then you can be a grown adult and still be enslaved by what your mom or your dad thinks about you. Or you can actually be enslaved by your children. You can be enslaved by the accomplishments that they need to live up to. You can be enslaved by a host of these sorts of things. You can be enslaved by popularity even. And the fact that if I could just be popular, but you're actually, even though you're famous and you're popular, you're enslaved by what the opinions and what the likes on Facebook look like, and on Instagram and on Twitter. You can actually be enslaved by the very thing that you think is going to bring you freedom. So this thing in Psalm 71, when he says, in you, O Lord, do I take refuge, this is an absolute affront to the way that you and I are wired as humans. The book of Romans tells us that the great fall of mankind is essentially this, that we take created things and put them above the Creator. Here's God, uncreated, holy, and yet we take things that are created and we swap the place. And when we do that, the result of that is really bondage. It brings us ultimately to the point in life where we're trying to find our identity and our purpose and our meaning in what we do. I'm reminded in the book of Acts, there's a man that says this, what must I do to be saved? And the response back is this, believe. And this is really what the psalmist is saying, is that he's going countercultural. He's swimming upstream, that everything in our society is saying that you need to do, you need to work, you need to be, you need to look, you need to talk, you need to act, you need to have. And yet the foundational principle of the Christian life is that we take refuge in the Lord. Now, how do we do that? How can you and I actually take refuge in the Lord? How can we have confidence in that? As Christians, we look to Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, God incarnate, who he doesn't remove himself. He's not this distant God cornered off away from humanity, but God in Christ we see, he took no refuge. He was exposed on a cross. And this again is the symbol of the Christian life, is the cross. Is that he stretched out his arms. He took no refuge. He endured all of the pains of hell, all of the pains of humanity in and of himself. He absorbed those things in. He didn't take refuge. And then in fact, when it says he wasn't put to shame, look, he was put to shame. The reason that you and I don't have to be put to shame is because he was put to shame on our behalf. I want you to see this. This is why. And then look at verse 2. In your righteousness, deliver me and rescue me. Incline your ear to me and save me. Why can the psalmist say, in your righteousness, deliver me? Because he knows that the only hope he has is the righteousness of God. It's not his acts, it's not his earning, it's not his effort, it's not his ability. It's simply this: Jesus, Lord, incline your ear, hear me, save me. And this is exactly what you and I have. When we come to faith in Christ, we get his righteousness exchanged for our righteousness, our works righteousness. My kids have to be enough for me. My parents have to be enough for me. My coworkers, the amount of money, the materialism. When you're enslaved by those sorts of things, isn't it amazing? I want you to think about this for a second. The sin of materialism enslaves you in such a way that it's not just about what you have, but it's about what your neighbors have. So you got a new car, oh, that's awesome. But what happens when your neighbor gets the new car? You're actually not only enslaved by the things that you're buying, but the things that other people are buying. And Christianity offers us real hope, real freedom, that we can actually find our righteousness in God. Greg, talk to me for a second about that you can find actual deliverance from this tension that every single one of us battle.
Yeah. God is interested in our freedom. God is interested in setting things right, the things that we have made wrong in our lives. And I love what you were talking about earlier, that God used your wife to speak to you about rest. He's doing the same thing through my wife, where she's laughing watching this.
It tends to be a theme, right?
Right. She is a great voice to me. Like, we're preparing for our vacation upcoming. And because this is a thing for me, even my vacation, my rest time, I like to be busy. I like to be doing. I like to be accomplishing. I like to be going. I like to be riding rides and staying very active. And so we are purposefully, this vacation upcoming, we're planning on finding a house in the woods just to be apart. Because she said to me recently, Greg, you need time away from stuff so that you can unwind. It doesn't happen immediately. And I love what this says in verse 2. In your righteousness, deliver me and rescue me. Incline your ear to me and save me. It says that God can and wants to do that, but it doesn't say how he's going to communicate to us, how he's going to change us. He speaks to us, you and me, through our wives a lot, right? But he also speaks to us through the Word of God. He speaks to us in our times of worship. He speaks to us just by that still small voice that shows up in our minds when we least expect it. He speaks to us through other people. He's speaking to us right now through this sermon, through this message. God speaks to us, and when we say, yes, Lord, I'm listening, he loves to partner with us, to help us to experience his righteousness, to help us to experience him setting things right that we have not gotten perfect yet.
It's good.
Yeah, and I look at this verse. I love the incline your ear and save me. What's funny is a lot of the times what we need to be saved from is ourself and our own thoughts and our own feelings about ourself. When like I said, when I don't get accepted by someone in a group, but what's awesome is that through Jesus' death and resurrection, he's my righteousness now in the eyes of the Father. I'm accepted because I'm justified by the faith that I have through Jesus Christ. So what's amazing is that he accepts me, he affirms me, he confirms me. Then when I go into the group settings, which I love, I'm a huge extrovert. I can go in healthy, not seeking affirmation, but just seeking to be open with my heart and comfortable in who I am in Christ, if I'm while I'm healthy, in the eyes of God,
That's
so
good.
it's really amazing. Save me from myself, my own thoughts that I put idols before you, acceptance, affirmation. You are my acceptance and my affirmation. I'm accepted through Christ, justified through him.
I know that means something to you today because we all have our vices. We all have the thing that pulls us towards our refuge, our comfort, and whatever that is. I want to give you hope today that Jesus can set you free from those sorts of things, that it is possible to live a life of righteousness, peace, and joy. You can have peace. You can actually be set free from those things. And that thing that's constantly barking in your ear telling you need to do or be or act or look that voice can actually be quieted down, and you can actually take a break. You can actually be yourself. You can actually be content in what you have, because the Christian claim is that we can find refuge in the Lord. Let's go on in this psalm and look a little deeper. He says, verse 3, "Be to me a rock of refuge to which I may continually come. You have given the command to save me, for you're my rock and my fortress. Rescue me, O my God, from the hand of the wicked, from the grasp of the unjust and the cruel man. For you, O Lord, are my hope, my trust, O Lord, from my youth." Here he's making this cry, this petition, "Lord, hear my prayer." Verse 6, "Upon you I've leaned from before my birth. You are he who took me from my mother's womb. My praise is continually of you. I've been as a portent to many, but you are a strong refuge. My mouth is filled with your praise and with your glory all the day. Do not cast me off in the time of my old age. Forsake me not when my strength is spent. For my enemies speak concerning me. Those who watch for my life consult together." Now he begins to turn here in what we talked about a week or two ago, this idea of the imprecatory psalms, where he's beginning to cry out for justice. And he says this, and God, they're saying, my enemies are saying that God has forsaken him. Pursue and seize him, for there's none to deliver him. Watch this. "O God, be not far from me. O God, make haste to help me. May my accusers be put to shame and consumed with scorn and disgrace. May they be covered who seek my hurt." He's crying out, "God, I am surrounded by these forces." And we know in the Christian life that we're surrounded by forces, and often we try to blame this on people. We look at a person that we may not like or get along with or something, and we try to localize it in a person. But in Christianity, we understand that it's not just people having bad days or people that don't like us, but that there's an actual enemy, a dark spiritual force that is against you, that does not want you to live a life of joy and peace and an abundant life, but that's actually out to kill and steal and destroy. And that people are not necessarily the problem. We might have problems with people, but they're not the problem. But there is an enemy that's out to get you. And here the psalmist is crying out, "God, deliver me, set me free from this powers of darkness that are faced against my life." Have you ever had that? Have you ever had something in your life where you look at it and you go, "This is beyond coincidence. Why in the world is this person motivated so strongly against me? This is, I've not done anything to them, and yet they're like out to get me." This is what the psalmist is saying. Deliver me from that. Then he goes into verse 14. I love this. "But I will hope continually." In fact, the King James actually says it better. He says, "Yet I will hope continually. I will praise you." I love the way that it says that. It says yet or but. It's that word that comes right there and it's saying, in the midst of everything, again, I'm going to find the horizon line. I'm going to find that thing that centers me, that balances me, that brings me back to the place that I'm supposed to be. "But I will hope continually, and I'll praise you yet more and more. My mouth will tell of your righteous acts, of your deeds of salvation all the day, for their number is past my knowledge." I want to say that to you today, that God is working beyond your ability to see. If you could actually see him as he is, your natural response in that would be to worship him. Now, we can be clouded, we can be confused, we can be overcome, overwhelmed with all of these sorts of things. But there's something about worship. There's something about bringing our emotions to God in the midst of them, not trying to run from them, but bringing our emotions, bringing our fears, our shame, all of those sorts of things to God. And in doing so, something happens. I've shared this over the last few weeks, and I want to remind you again, when you're dizzy, when you're seasick, when you're out in the waters in the midst of a storm, you don't need to close your eyes. You don't need to go beneath the deck. You need to stand on the deck in the midst of whatever's happening and find the horizon line. And when you find that horizon line, it brings everything into perspective. And this is what the psalmist does over and over and over through prayer, through song. He sets a horizon line and says, "But I will continue to hope. I will continue to worship." And that's what I want you to do today. We're going to sing this song about the goodness of God. And if you need prayer right now, maybe your whole world is upside down, click the link for prayer. Somebody's waiting to pray with you. But it's important. No one can do this for you. No one can do this for you. No one can open your mouth and sing. No one can open your mouth and pray. No one in the moment, the time that you find yourself in, is able to say, but I will continually hope. This is what lament is all about. We're not just complaining. We're not just whining. We're lamenting our emotions so that we can find our hope in God, so that we can ask Him to break in and do something. Let's sing about the goodness of God today and turn our hope, our affection, our emotions, our lament back to God today. Kenny, would you?